Meet Aglaea, our fashion-forward architect of chaos who quite literally stitches damage into her enemies while turning your battlefield into her own personal runway. If you ever wanted to fight alongside a self-destructing fashion memo sprite who nukes enemies with the lightning damage while being the world's most diva-like assistant, well, your prayers have been answered. However, I will also be super honest here in this guide. Aglaea is a very fun character to play, and once you understand how she works, you will also know how to gear her. There's not a whole lot to it except for maybe optimal speed tuning, but I wouldn't say she is the most free-to-play friendly character. While our Remembrance Trailblazer is definitely one of her best installed options, Sunday is the one who pushes her to the next level. On top of that, she effectively has no ceiling when it comes to gearing. The more time you spend in the mines for her best installed relic set, the better she's going to become. So keep that in mind when it comes to our Lightning Goddess. Before we talk about how to gear her and how to play her, let us do a quick TLDR rundown of her entire kit. It does sound complicated at first glance, but it is fairly simple. Her skill is Aglaea's bread and butter, and by bread I mean summoning a sentient lightning memo sprite who moonlights as a damage dealer and ticking time bomb. Casting her skill calls Garment Maker onto the battlefield and it immediately takes a turn. If Garment Maker is already active, her skill will heal it instead. As a rhetorical question here, does healing a memo sprite who eventually self-destructs feel like a waste? Maybe, but if keeping it alive a little bit longer helps you push through your enemies, you will be glad you did. Her talent is where Aglaea's kit starts coming together. Garment Maker is going to inherit 66% of her HP and 35% of her speed. Fashionably late, but worth the wait. On top of that, Aglaea is going to inflict the so-called Seam Stitch debuff on enemies whenever she attacks, which is going to add extra damage to your attacks, equal to 30% of her attack, whenever Garment Maker or Aglaea herself attack a stitched enemy. A few key insights here are going to be that our Seam Stitch debuff is not very impressive at first glance, but it will ramp up fairly quickly. If you put it on a boss enemy, you will do a lot of additional damage over a short period of time. Especially because Aglaea and our Garment Maker are most likely going to be the highest speed characters we have seen in the game so far. On top of that, Aglaea's attack is going to increase based on her speed due to her passive talent. However, you can only have one debuff active at a time, so deciding who you're going to attack is fairly important. As such, do not underestimate this debuff. In my opinion, Aglaea is a single target character moonlighting as an AoE DPS. She performs best in 3 target scenarios, but she will still do insane boss damage. Moving on, we have Aglaea's ultimate. It has a variety of effects. First of all, you're going to summon Garment Maker if it is not already on the field. Secondly, if it is on the field, you're going to fully restore its HP. And lastly, you're going to enter Aglaea's Supreme Stance, turning her into a speedy, electrified goddess. And by goddess, I quite literally mean goddess. Just look at this, what else do you want me to say? Not only does she look amazing herself, but she also does insane damage and attacks more often than your enemies would like her to. Absolutely insane character. While in your Supreme Stance, Aglaea gains up to 90% speed. We will talk about that in a moment as it kinda depends on your Garment Maker's talent. And she gains access to her enhanced basic attack, which is going to do massive damage to a single target, as well as adjacent targets. However, there are 2 problems. First of all, a countdown appears on your action order. When this countdown reaches 0, your ultimate is going to end, and Garment Maker is going to self-destruct like a diva who didn't get her encore. Secondly, while her ultimate is active, Aglaea is not going to restore any skill points. Meaning skill point management is crucial when it comes to our goddess here. As a rhetorical question, is it worth letting your Garment Maker die for a big burst of damage? Probably. Will you cry a little bit when it happens? Absolutely. Not to mention if you play her optimally, which kinda is the goal of this guide, right? Then your Garment Maker is never going to die because Aglaea is effectively not leaving her ultimate window at all. You are going to use your ultimate again before it ends. As simple as that. Lastly, we have our Garment Maker's abilities. We have its skill and its talent. Garment Maker's skill does damage and that is about it. However, its talent is where our kit finally comes together. Every time it attacks an enemy who has Seam Stitch on it, Garment Maker gains speed. Up to 6 times, which ends up being over 300 speed in total, so quite a lot. If you use Aglaea's ultimate while Garment Maker has any number of stacks, she is going to get 15% speed per stack, so up to 90% speed as mentioned before. And, most importantly, you can even gain those stacks while her ultimate is still active. So you don't need to wait for Garment Maker to build 6 stacks before you use your ultimate. Next up we have Aglaea's technique. It lets her start combat with Garment Maker already active, Seam Stitch applied to a random enemy and lightning damage applied to every single opponent on the field. Oh, and on top of that, as if all of that isn't enough already, she's also getting 30 energy, because why not? When it comes to your leveling order, I will be super honest here, you do not need to level her skill at all. It only heals your Garment Maker and you're most likely never going to use it. But everything else, all the way to max level. As simple as that. Her talent will increase your debuff damage, her ultimate is going to increase your speed scaling, and her basic attack is going to increase your enhanced basic attack damage. As such, you want to level them all. That is kinda it when it comes to her talents. She is extremely powerful, but only when you gear her correctly. As such, let us jump into relics and weapons. First of all, gearing Aglaea in itself is not very difficult. There's exactly one relic set and one ornament set you want to go for. We are talking about our Hero of Triumphant Song and our Banana Amusement Park. But, and that is why in my opinion Aglaea is not necessarily a free-to-play friendly character, or at the very least a very high investment character, her substats and main stats will absolutely make or break her. Aglaea is a character who prefers to kinda never leave her ultimate window. Because once it ends, your Garment Maker is going to die and with it go all of your speed stacks. As such, you need to reach certain speed and energy regeneration levels in order to constantly have it up. One way to do that is to have Eidolon 1. It will effectively give you a lot of energy regeneration. If you don't have that, your other option is going to be an energy regeneration link rope. This will allow you to always have your ultimate ready before it runs out, if you have enough base speed that is. And technically speaking, enough opponents, because if you only have a single opponent on the field, you're not going to restore enough energy before her ultimate runs out. But, you know, it kinda is what it is. On your orb, you can use either attack or lightning damage. It is fairly close to each other, so it kinda depends on your substats. And speaking of substats, we are looking at crit rate, crit damage, speed and attack. So in itself, a very, very simple DPS character. For your relics, you want to go for crit rate or crit damage on your chest, and most likely crit rate, as you kinda want her to be as close to 100% crit rate as she can be. And on your boots, well, speed it is. Let us take a look at some stat goals you can try to go for. They are fairly decent stat goals, so a little bit of investment needs to happen here, but they are not like somewhere in orbit out of reach for you, right? So attack around 3000 attack and you're good to go. Crit rate 60%-ish, right? Because you're most likely going to play her in combination with Sunday, who is going to give her 20% crit rate due to his talent, and your RMC, your Remembrance Trailblazer, because she is also going to give you 10% crit rate due to Eidolon 1. Crit damage, I'm not going to give you a number here, as much as you can get after having enough crit rate. As simple as that. And when it comes to speed, there are a lot of details we could potentially talk about here. However, I'm going to give you one number here, and everything else I'm going to pin down in the comments, because there are a lot of scenarios where you have +1 Sunday, you have +1 Sunday on one walk, you have +1 this and that, you know. So as a very, very basic guideline here, go for 134 speed. That is kind of it. More speed is going to translate to more attack due to her passive ability, but the next major breakpoint is at over 250 speed, which is very difficult to get to. Obviously, 250 speed in combat, not outside of combat, but still extremely difficult to get to. Maybe even unrealistic for 90% of the player base. As mentioned before, 134 speed is your best option here, but I'm also going to highlight a few other options in the pinned comments for people who truly want to min-max her. Now for Lightcones, we all know there are barely any Remembrance Lightcones in the game right now. Her best in slot is going to be her signature Lightcone, Time Woven into Gold. It will increase your crit damage by up to 54% and it will also increase your basic attack damage. However, our most important aspect here is that it will give you at least 12 points of base speed. This means that if you have this Lightcone, Aglaea is not looking at a base speed value of 102, but 114. As such, Aglaea's speed increase due to her ultimate will take this new value as a baseline, so fairly important. After her signature Lightcone, we have Sweat Now quite less, Genius's Greeting and Reminiscence to a certain extent. All of them work, but without a doubt, Time Woven into Gold is her best in slot option. And that is kinda it when it comes to gearing. As mentioned before, there's not a whole lot to it, but her ceiling is basically non-existent. She will be a character who can go absolutely crazy, like you can see in the footage from time to time, or she is going to hit like a red noodle. At the very end of the day, it kinda depends on you and your RNG, and, let's be honest here, the time you're going to spend in the mines. Now let us get to some team composition you can use on her. Now, instead of just giving you her best in slot team, let me actually go over all 5 of our top candidates here and you can pick depending on who you have. Aglaea is a hyper carry DPS. She wants to have full support from everyone in her team. Robin, Sunday and our RMC are exceptionally good when it comes to supporting her, and all 3 of them have their own advantages. Höchre and Gallagher work well as sustainers depending on how you gear them. Let us start with our support characters. Sunday has action advancement in his kit, energy regeneration, crit rate and crit damage, and obviously a massive damage buff for Aglaea and her Memo Sprite. His kit is tailor-made for her. He is by far her best in slot option. Robin is very similar to Sunday. She provides action advancement with her ultimate, but unfortunately not as often as her brother. She also gives your team a huge attack buff, which is going to help out with your Seam Stitch debuff. An alternative option here, if you don't have Sunday or Robin, is going to be Tingyan. I don't feel like I need to explain what her kit does, as she is one of our oldest units in the game, but all I'm going to say is energy regeneration. Lastly, we have our RMC. Crit rate and 2 damage buffs. What else do you want me to say? Free to play? Yeah, that as well. A very good unit overall, not just for Aglaea here, but also for Herta, for example. For sustainers, as mentioned before, we have Höchre. She restores energy by using her ultimate and provides Aglaea with a massive attack buff. If you don't have her, you can go for Gallagher on Crit Pro Crow or even Linksha on Crit Pro Crow. It kinda depends on who you have. What is extremely important here is to use characters who help Aglaea restore as much energy as she can. Our Lightning Goddess here has one of the highest energy cost ultimates in the entire game. And preferably she wants to spam it before it runs out due to her Garment Maker dying. If it does run out, we are looking at a massive damage loss. Therefore, once again, Aglaea is to a certain extent not free to play friendly. You want to have units like Sunday or Höchre, or maybe even her signature Lightcone, in order to really make use of her. As such, Aglaea is a character who shines at high investment. She's not like Herta where you constantly see big damage numbers, but rather than that, she does a lot of damage constantly. And most importantly, her animations are amazing. She's a very, very beautiful character. And I know a lot of people care about that more than, let's say, overall damage performance. If you like Aglaea as much as I do, then do me a favor, leave a like, a comment, a sub, all of that stuff. It really helps out. Thanks for watching, have a great day or night wherever you live, and I will see you in the next one. Bye bye.